Here's a quick run through of our triple big blue setups filters. The standard filters you would normally get with the system would be the 5 micron sediment filter, a activated carbon filter, followed by a 1 micron sediment filter. This standard set is okay for most municipal areas. You'll remove dirt particles, you'll block a little bit of bacteria, not all of it, and you'll remove chlorine. If you have a very high chlorine content, what you would want to do is take 2 of the carbon filters and just the 1 sediment filter, because your risk of bacteria is lower then. If you have very little chlorine, but you find that you do have some bacteria, you would want to change it to other options again. Basically, the most important thing to do when you put in one of these systems is figure out when you actually need to change the filters and what the condition of your water is. On these sediment filters, it's very nice. You can actually see them getting dirty from the outside going inwards. When you have them in place, you'll see a little ring will form around the edge here to show you how, it basically shows where it seals on the system. And you want to change this filter a few millimeters before it gets to that ring, because otherwise you'll start to get passed through and that will damage further filters or just go straight through into your house. So they're very nice. There's not really a fixed time that you need to replace them, as it'll vary from source to source, and it will really be anywhere from 1 month to 2 years. So it is something you need to put in place, have a look at it every few months until you've figured out how long the filters last. The second filter, the carbon filter, is a little bit more interesting, because typically for removing chlorine, it will actually last quite a long time. But the big problem is it's a trap for bacteria. Bacteria loves growing in carbon filters. So if you open it up, check if you've got sort of a sliminess on the filter itself. If you've got a sliminess on it, that means it should have been replaced already. So if you open it up after 6 months' time and find that the filter is slimy, next time open it up after 3 months and have a look what the situation is there. If you find that these carbon filters aren't lasting long enough, then what you can do is you can replace it with a KDF cartridge. Now what KDF does is that's carbon mixed in with a special, with something very special, KDF. And what the KDF in effect does is it kills the bacteria sitting in the filter. So you don't have this effect where you have bacteria growing like crazy in the filter. So let's say you have a municipal source where it's a bit dirty, so you keep the normal sediment filters, but the big problem is this carbon filter doesn't last. What you can do is you can take out the carbon filter out of the system, place the KDF filter in there, and the KDF filter will last about 4 times as long as the carbon filter. Same thing applies to it. If it starts to get slimy, then the KDF is depleted, time to replace it. If you find that your water is getting slimy even with the KDF filter, then what we'd recommend is you'd take away your 5 micron, replace it with a 1 micron, keep the KDF in place, which is resistant to bacteria, and now add a new filter. This pleated filter is rated at 0.2 micron. The pleated filters is just another form of sediment filters, so you get various micron ratings up to 100. But the specific one you'd want to use is the 0.2 micron, as that is a physical barrier that's fine enough to block bacteria. If you have high levels of bacteria, however, we definitely recommend a double barrier system. Then you would look at adding a UV light as well. But basically, the most common filter sets for the Big Blue would be the standard one, or one with a KDF and a sediment filter, or if you have more bacteria, you change that final sediment filter for this 0.2 micron filter. Alright, so how do you actually check what the situation is of the system? On your Big Blue system, it's very, very nice and easy. If you have got a bypass system in place, close off the system so you don't have water flowing to it. Press one of the red pressure release valves. This will just release any pressure that's built up inside of the system. And then normally you can just take it by hand and unscrew the housings. Then you take your filter out. As I said, check what the condition is of the filter, like with the sediment filter, how far is it dirty. With the carbon filters, is it slimy? With this 0.2 one, it'll get dirty or it will get a bit slimy from bacteria. Then once you've checked it, if you want to put it back, make sure you check that the O-rings are in place, because they can fall out on the big blue system. So before you fit it back, ensure that your O-rings are in place. If the housing was very tight, use the spanner, which is an optional item, just to loosen it. You shouldn't need the spanner for tightening ever, but for loosening it can often be a good idea. And then you'd take the new filter, which you want to put it in the housing, place it inside. And a nice thing to do to get it to line up is I always like to balance it on a finger at the bottom, so you have some pressure pushing up against it, and then take my other hand and turn it just gently to make sure that it doesn't get cross-threaded until you find the thread of the housing, and then when it grips, you can just close it. And then normally, if you take it with two hands and really just tighten it, that should be sufficient for it to seal. If you then turn the water back on, like in the bypass system's case, close the bypass loop, open your supply loop, open the water to the house here, then you check for leaks. If you find that there's a little bit of a leak going, just tighten it a little bit with a spanner, if you've already tightened it all the way with your hands. If it's quite a bit of water coming out here, it's probably the O-ring which isn't placed incorrectly, so take everything out again, check that O-ring, put it back in place. And that's basically the filter sets for the triple big blue, and how to replace the filters.